Good morning. I hope you're doing well today. Today we're going to be in Luke chapter 7, verses 11 through 17. We're going to pick up right after we were in the text last week. We remember we were with Jesus, the centurion, who healed the centurion's servant. And so this week we're in a slightly different story where Jesus is going to a town called Nain. Town called Nain that's not mentioned anywhere else in the New Testament. I see Jesus, after he had healed this centurion's servant, he went on his way to that town called Nain. And so he had two traveling parties. You had the traveling party that Jesus had. It says in Luke 7:11 that it was Jesus, his disciples, and a large crowd. It's interesting that Luke separates the difference between those disciples and the large crowd. I think oftentimes we think that just people that are in the going to church are with Jesus, and they're not all necessarily with Jesus. And so you have his disciples, and you have a large crowd, and they're traveling. And as they neared the gate, there was a funeral. And at the funeral, come out, there was a widow, which means widow means that her husband is dead. And then her only son is now dead. That's the funeral that Jesus bumps into. So you have these two traveling groups, if you will. Jesus' group is probably excited. They're probably talking about what they had seen. They had walked for about 20 miles from Capernaum to Nain. And so they were probably maybe talking, I can't believe Jesus did that. And then, this happened, and then this happened. And they were excited. What's going to happen next? I can't imagine. That's the crowd. And then you had the crowd mourners that were sad. The widow who she was just, she's all by herself now. And more importantly, being all by herself, she has no way of taking care of herself. And so just as Jesus neared the gate of the town, the dead man was being carried out, his mother's only son. So now she's a widow and her only son is dead. And the large crowd came. And when Jesus saw her, it says in verse 13 that he had compassion on her. He had compassion. And that's an amazing thing, is that Jesus had compassion on her. And he said, "Don't weep. Don't weep." That's very interesting. She's crying because her son is dead. She's crying because maybe her husband is dead. Maybe she's also mourning the fact that basically she has no shot. She has no way of provision. She's got a hopeless life. And then Jesus came up and he touched the coffin. The pallbearers stopped. The pallbearers stopped because Jesus was becoming ceremonial unclean. You don't touch dead bodies, especially if you're a rabbi. And so Jesus comes up, he touches the coffin, and he touched it, and he looks at the young man and he says, "I tell you, get up." He sat up and he began to talk. And fear came over everybody, and they saw this. The report of Jesus grew, and all of these things happened. But what's interesting here is that Jesus went to a town that no one goes to. What's interesting here is that in the centurion story, we see that Jesus said there's no man in all of Israel, no one in all of Israel that has faith like this centurion. But here we don't see anyone requesting Jesus. Here we don't see anyone asking Jesus to raise him. We don't see anything like that. We see a mourning mom, a mourning widow. Her son's probably young, maybe grown, but very young, is dead. But Jesus restored her. Jesus not only raised the dead man, but he also restored the widow. And that's what Jesus does. Not only does he raise the dead to life, but he also restores those that are broken, no matter where you come from. Even if it's a town such as Nain that no one's ever heard of, that no one will ever go to again, and that nobody ever really cares about. That's because no one is overlooked by Christ. God bless.